I speak to the Ummah. I speak to the Muslimin. I have a new question. The question to ask is, who sends the bomber on his mission, and what does he think of the bomber? When a man puts a bomb jacket on an angry boy, does he respect the boy who is about to become a martyr? And when the boy drives into the bazaar and kills a dozen or 100 unarmed people, mostly Muslims, what does the man who sends him to his death think of him afterward? Does he remember his name 2 weeks later? To find out, we should analyze the behavior of famous men who found it easy to convince other men to go to war, to go to their deaths. Let us analyze, for instance, Napoleon, the Emperor of France. The lips of Napoleon were blessed by some dark angel. He could make a speech and say nothing, but he said it beautifully. The French people were convinced he brought them a divine victory. Men and women followed him into battle. At the time, a general needed an army of 20,000 men to accomplish anything at all. Such an army was called a Grand Army, and Napoleon abandoned 3 grand armies between 1801 and 1814. He left one in Egypt fighting the English while he escaped. He left one in Russia, freezing, sick, desperate, and being shot one by one as they struggled through the snow. He abandoned a 3rd Grand Army on the field of Waterloo, ordering them forward to be slaughtered by the British while he escaped with their reinforcements to a new battlefield. Here was a man who found it easy to manipulate other men to fight for him and to die for him. All he had to do was make a speech. Because he found it easy to do, he thought men who would fight for him came in endless lines, an endless supply of men who would go to their deaths for Napoleon. But there were survivors of his war, and when survivors told the French people how they had been abandoned in Egypt, how they had been abandoned in Russia, the number of men and boys willing to die for him was reduced. Those who had the intelligence to listen and learn did not volunteer for Napoleon's 3rd Grand Army. Once Napoleon had used up all the men who were willing to die for him, there were no more armies between him and his enemies. He was exiled to an island, and someone poisoned him. The French blamed the English blamed the French. No one really cares. Adolf Hitler of Germany was also a man who could manipulate armies of men by speaking. Just like Napoleon, he told his people stories of their nation, their history. He reminded them of a time when they were a great nation of warriors, a time when they ruled the world. Then he told them they were no longer great, and he pointed his finger at a long list of enemies. He blamed the enemies for Germany's fall for greatness, and the German people were willing to fight, to kill, to attack, to arrest all the enemies he listed for them. They practiced killing people by bombing cities in Spain. Then they attacked Poland and divided it with Russia. Then they attacked Russia. Once again, it was too easy to manipulate men to fight and die for him. Adolf Hitler demanded impossible things of his armies. When the best of his generals spoke publicly about him, Hitler ordered Rommel to take poison. The death of Rommel educated some of his young officers. They attempted the first assassination. At Stalingrad, Hitler ordered the 3rd Army to fight to the death rather than escape from Russia. He ordered the entire city of Paris to be destroyed by artillery. He ordered the extermination of the Jews by poison gas. Each act of hostility turned more of his own people against him. Soon, millions of men in his armies preferred to surrender rather than fight another day for him. Across the world, so many people and nations hated him that he was forced to commit suicide, and in Germany, suicide was not popular as it is among Muslims. Both Napoleon and Hitler found it easy to manipulate men into murder. They described their enemies, and they made those enemies into the enemies of all men who could hear them. This technique of leadership is called propaganda. And it leads to a state of sociopathic behavior called mob hysteria or mass hysteria. Mass hysteria comes into existence naturally when a nation or a group is consistently told they are being attacked, and politicians use the techniques of Hitler and Napoleon to get money and to gain cooperation against the enemy. Here is the trick of it. It is not necessary to have a real enemy. If you have the morality of a Napoleon or a Hitler, you can just point out someone who is different. Hitler's trick was very simple. He analyzed Germany and decided which people would most logically vote for him and which people would most logically vote for someone else. Those who might vote for him became the super race, the good people. Those who might vote for someone else became the enemy race, the Untermensch, the underpeople. In every communication, the super race were told in every possible way that the enemy race were their enemies, that they were plotting and scheming against them, that they had already taken away their birthright, and that they were the underlying cause behind every problem. Of course, it's unrealistic, but when you are constantly being told you are the good people, you believe it. So instead of asking good questions about the lies that are being told to you, you focus your hatred on the enemy race. This gives power and control to the shabby little Hitlers and Napoleons of our world. They control you by aiming you at someone else. Then they ask you for money, or they send you to Baghdad to kill someone who has never heard of you. So the question to ask again and again is this: when men tell you to help them kill your enemies, do they respect you, or are they using you? I am Quixote.